These are all different aspects of the right to fair hearing. I will now elaborate a little bit more on right to fair hearing, since not all facets are captured in the statute. I just showed you a few examples to illustrate where is the responsibility or the obligation to follow principles of natural justice, where is it coming from? And to that extent, I traced it to due process and to the procedure codified in the statute under which you exercise your powers. Now we'll spend a few minutes getting into a bit more detail about the two main principles of natural justice, which is right to fair hearing and the rule against bias. Right to fair hearing. There are three main dimensions to this right to fair hearing, and as I said, the examples that we just took from GST statute and similar examples can be found in the Customs Act. They are within this framework. They are from within this framework of right to fair hearing. So, right to fair hearing means, firstly, that the person against whom the proposed action is to be taken, that person must be informed. Informed of what? Informed of the charges against the person, the reasons why those charges are being levied against that person, what is the nature of the action being contemplated against the person, what are the consequences of the proposed action. All the details need to be provided to the person against whom that action is going to be taken. The notice which is sent, the show cause notice, which I just mentioned, features both in GST statutes and customs. This notice cannot be vague. It cannot be unintelligible. It has to be precise and unambiguous. To repeat, precise and unambiguous about what? Whatever I just said, which is that if there is a statutory provision which you believe the taxpayer has violated, that statutory provision has to be specified in the notice. That is what I meant when I said that inform the person of the charges against that person. So for example, I'll take a very easy to understand example from the GST law. You know that under CGST Act, input tax credit related terms and conditions are given in section 16 and 17. So if you are issuing a notice, if you're contemplating action of denial of credit to a particular person and you're issuing the notice, you, for instance, must not write that credit has been availed in contravention of section 16 and 17 of the CGST Act. That is vague, even though you might feel that 16 and 17 is what you're looking at, but that is vague. A precise and unambiguous notice would identify the subsection and clause the violation of which is being observed by you in the business of that particular person. You know this, right? That why did I say that you can't write section 16? If you look at section 16 subsection 2, I'm talking about CGST Act, provides the conditions which must be fulfilled if a taxpayer has to legitimately take credit. So one clause will say tax invoice should be there with the person taking the credit. Another clause will say the person should have filed return. Another clause will say that the supplier should have deposited the tax with the government. That is just subsection 2. That's just the variety in subsection 2. If you look at subsection 3 of section 16, it says that if the person has claimed depreciation of the tax component, then credit cannot be taken. So you can understand there's a whole variety of situations contemplated in section 16, and I'm not even going to speak about section 17's variety of situations that it deals with. All that I'm trying to say is give you an example of what I mean in saying that the show cause notice must be precise and unambiguous. Writing section 16 is not enough. It has to be section 16, subsection 2, clause A. That is a precise notice. And why is that important? That is important because if you are not precise in writing section 16, subsection 2, clause A, or section 16, subsection 3, then there is very little point in giving the notice to the person. Let's say you're issuing the notice to me. I wouldn't know how to start replying to the show cause notice if all that you have written is that Ms. Sanyukta, you have taken credit in violation of section 16. I won't know where to start. What are you looking at? Do you think I've claimed depreciation on that tax? Do you think I don't have the tax invoice? Do you think I've not filed my returns? What is it? So that's just an example to say what is a precise notice. Again, any other details which are relevant to help the taxpayer respond to your queries and concerns, all of it must be there. I'll give you just one more example. And this relates to a judgment which I have quoted later on in the presentation as well, but let me give you the example already. This matter came up before the Delhi High Court. The show cause notice was issued in that matter. The allegation of the GST officers was that the person has issued invoices without supplying any goods or services, and as a result of that passed on or allowed the person to whom invoices have been issued, allowed that person to take credit illegally. No goods and services were supplied. You just issued some fake invoices, and the recipient of those invoices could take credit, and that is obviously against the law. But that show cause notice did not, and you will be amazed, I think, I found it quite amazing, that the notice gives this allegation but does not give any details of what are those invoice numbers that the tax officer identified as being fake invoices. The show cause notice doesn't give the duration. If you don't have the invoice numbers, maybe you know the duration during which the business was doing this. But there was no dates also over there. There was no amount also of how much of such invoices have been issued by that person. It had no details, no invoice numbers, nothing to trace what transactions were being talked about, no dates, no period, no quantum, nothing. It just said that, that this is the allegation against you. And the funniest part of this was, and this allows me to come to the other components of a show cause notice, that in that particular case, the show cause notice said that an opportunity of personal hearing is being given to you. Please come and meet so-and-so officer. But the notice did not give the time, date or venue of this. It just said opportunity of personal hearing is being given with no other details as to when the person is supposed to come, date, time, place. No details were there. So obviously you know what would have happened when this went to the High Court. After the show cause notice, some order was also issued. Basically, the High Court set all of it aside and pointed out these very facts which I am telling you as pretty shocking. What is that show cause notice where there are no details, right? So the notice that has to be issued cannot be an empty formality that you see in section 73, 74 or section 28, let's say, of Customs Act, that a notice has to be issued and you issue a notice. Yes, a notice must be issued, but there are certain components of that notice. The contents of that notice are equally important. I'll quickly go over what I just said, mentioning precisely the statutory provision, the violation of which is being alleged against the taxpayer, mentioning the reasons why you think that has been violated. Again, you can't say Section 16, subsection 2, clause A has been violated without giving any further reasons. What did you observe? So giving those facts and reasons which substantiate the allegation of that specific, of that violation of the specific statutory provisions. Any other information which will allow the person to give a constructive response to that show cause notice. And obviously, giving enough time. Maybe 24 hours isn't enough for complex situations to be responded to, and in that sense, you need to judge how much time is considered as good practice within the department, how much time should be given for replying to a show cause notice. It cannot be, again, as I said, an empty formality, giving a very small period of, short period of time to respond to the show cause notice. And if in that very show cause notice, you are giving the time and opportunity for hearing, the time, the date, the venue of that hearing, all of that has to be provided as well. And as I mentioned of this Delhi High Court judgment, if these details are absent in the notice, if the notice is vague or is short on any of these components, then the whole process becomes vitiated. And I'll come back to this point again towards the end of the presentation. But at this point, all that I was talking about was the first dimension of right to fair hearing, which is informing the person who is going to be subjected to your decision of all the possible information so that the person can reply back constructively and you can have that dialogue, so to say. The second, okay, and I'll give you one exception to the notice before I come to the second part of it. This is a judgment of 2015. It doesn't deal with GST, but it dealt with excise duty. The judgment is Dharampal Satyapal versus Commissioner of Central Excise. Why am I picking out on this judgment? Because this is some sort of an example to show where the tax officers felt that there is no point to issuing a show cause notice given the facts of this case, and I will tell you the facts of the case in 10 seconds. This was an example where tax officers thought that given the facts of this case, there is no point of issuing a show cause notice. What is it that the person, the taxpayer can do? Nothing can be done. The Supreme Court clearly said that there can be situations where issuing a show cause notice may be pointless, let's say. But the administrative authorities, the tax officers in this case, could not have taken that call to jump over principles of natural justice based on some presumption which they are making. Whether it's useless or not to issue a show cause notice in a particular situation has to be determined as the matter proceeds. The courts can do that. Supreme Court can do that in deciding this matter, but tax officers or administrative authorities in general cannot jump over principles of natural justice on their own. So basically what had happened in this fact situation was this, that an excise exemption was given through a notification issued in July 1999. Then that particular exemption was rolled back. It was withdrawn retrospectively through a provision in the Finance Act The retrospective withdrawal of exemption was challenged before the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said that this retrospective withdrawal of exemption is perfectly fine, there's nothing wrong with it. So that particular case closed, which meant that if any person, this particular company in this case, has taken the benefit of the excise exemption, and by it has been decided that the government's withdrawal, retrospective withdrawal of that exemption is correct and proper, then the company that took the exemption for these years, 1999 to 2003, has to give back, has to pay back the tax which it never paid because it was working under that exemption. What the tax officer did was to issue a recovery order that pay XYZ amount, didn't issue a show cause notice. And the argument was that here there is no debate. The Supreme Court has said that that withdrawal, retrospective withdrawal is fine. There is no debate. You have to give that money, so why issue a show cause notice? I just issued an order directly. And what, even though you will see that the Supreme Court agrees with that eventually, it very specifically says, and now I'm going to read out this extract from the judgment, is it open to the administrative authority which has to take a decision to dispense with the requirement of principles of natural justice on the ground that affording such an opportunity will not make any difference? Answer is no. It is not permissible for the administrative authority to jump over the compliance of the principles of natural justice on the ground that even if notice had been given or hearing had been provided, it would have served no useful purpose. It is not for the tax authorities to jump over any principles of natural justice. Of course, when the matter goes before the court in deciding whether to set aside the recovery order and recovery proceedings, the court can apply its mind to understand whether it should set aside that recovery order or not, what will be achieved if the Supreme Court sets aside the recovery proceedings in this case. And Supreme Court said that we believe that given the other Supreme Court judgment and given the fact that the amount sought to be recovered is not under dispute, there is no need to scratch out the recovery order or the recovery proceedings. But as I said, it's a determination only the Supreme Court can make, and peculiar to the case where the parties said that we don't dispute the amount which the department has computed as payable by us. Because if the amount was disputed, then there was a whole need to issue the show cause notice and do the calculation and to figure out how much should be recovered. It just so happened that the amount wasn't disputed. But that tells you that even in such a situation, it is ideal to issue a show cause notice, not just because the Supreme Court says that you must issue a show cause notice, but because you don't know what if the amount you're calculating is not matching with the taxpayer's calculation of the excise duty that was payable. So this judgment is often given in administrative law textbooks as an example of an exception to right to fair hearing. I disagree with the way usually it is presented, because the Supreme Court has clearly said that it is not for the authorities to jump over these principles of natural justice. They have to follow it. Yes, the court can determine whether there's any point of setting aside those proceedings which didn't follow principles of natural justice, setting them aside or not. So that was on notice. I'll complete the other two dimensions of right to fair hearing, and then if you have any questions, we can take those questions before I move on. The second dimension is the actual hearing, adequate opportunity to put forward their defense against the proposed action. So, as I've said already, the actual hearing, the personal hearing has to be given, opportunity has to be given to the taxpayer. Also part of it is that the person who, the taxpayer has the right to know the evidence, which is sought to be considered in reaching that decision, and to inspect the documents that are being relied upon for the said purpose. Also, if there are witnesses who give the evidence, then the person also has the right to cross-examine those witnesses and lead his own evidence in his defense. So it's not just that you give the person the opportunity for personal hearing. In the course of this investigation, if you have come across evidence which you intend to rely upon in reaching a decision, that evidence, whether it's documentary or whether there are witnesses whose statements are being relied upon, all of that has to be made available to the taxpayer as well. Now, there is obviously some flexibility in the way principles of natural justice are implemented on the ground. What do I mean by flexibility? That sharing evidence, documentary evidence which the tax authority may have, does not mean literally making photocopies of the entire evidence and giving it to the taxpayer. Maybe it's possible in some situations, maybe it's not. In those situations, even if you allow the taxpayer to come and read, come and inspect, make notes, that will also suffice in fulfilling this requirement. So what I'm trying to say is that there is a flexibility. These requirements are not set in stone, that you have to make copies of the evidence and give it, email it or courier it to the taxpayer. There is a spirit to it. The spirit is of, I would say, transparency and clear dealing with the taxpayer, that this is what I have with me on the basis of which I'm going to reach my decision. You also look at it and give your response to it. So there's a spirit to it. It is none of what I'm saying has to be taken always in a very strict sense that only one way of doing something is possible. There are cases which you can pull out, Supreme Court cases where, for instance, it has been said that the particular matter was very simple and straightforward. It is okay if the personal hearing wasn't given, so long as opportunity was given to make a representation in writing. That is enough if personal hearing wasn't given. But that is really dependent upon facts and circumstances of the case, and in that sense it is useful to know that that flexibility is available. But I hope that the spirit of these requirements is what needs to guide your decisions and actions. Similarly, I wrote about cross-examination. There are matters where cross-examination wasn't allowed and the court has said it's fine. These were the reasons why cross-examination wasn't allowed, and so it is all right, because let's say the written testimonies were made available, or whatever was necessary to share that information transparently was done. So these are the this was the second requirement or second dimension of right to fair hearing, which is giving adequate opportunity and information so as to enable the person to make their representation. The third and the last aspect of right to fair hearing is giving a reasoned order. Why? For the simple reason that if a reasoned order is not given, then there is no check on the exercise of power, whether that exercise was an arbitrary action or whether you considered the relevant facts, the relevant judicial precedents, You considered the arguments which are being made, and then you took a decision. So the first reason why reasoned order is important is because it creates that transparency, it creates that accountability. Also, if the order does not give reasons, then the scope of judicial review gets limited. And that's not good, obviously, from the taxpayer's perspective, because when the judiciary reviews any particular order which is challenged, they are not just looking at the law or the facts, they're also looking at the process of reasoning, how that law has been applied to facts, what facts have been considered relevant, what facts have been not considered, and all of that is what you will capture in a reasoned order. The facts, what you feel are relevant facts, what you feel are extraneous and you don't need to place any weightage on them. How does the law, the provision of law, interact with those facts which you outline? What are the judicial precedents that you know of which you are following? All of this is part of a reasoned order, and if this is missing, then the scope of judicial review also gets limited, because the judiciary doesn't know why you reached a particular decision. Again, coming back to legitimacy, it enhances a reasoned order, enhances legitimacy of the institution. There is a higher probability that, that if a decision is reached after thinking over and articulating reasons, it will be a more just order and it will be less arbitrariness in it. So these were the three dimensions of right to fair hearing: giving a notice, informing the taxpayer of all the relevant information which may be needed to constructively engage with you and satisfy your doubts and concerns. Secondly, giving the opportunity of hearing, which, depending upon what that particular case is, could mean giving the right of cross-examination of witnesses as well, sharing all the evidence with the taxpayers. And the third dimension was giving a reasoned order. These are broadly three critical dimensions of right to fair hearing. And going back to the examples from GST and Customs Statute, you know that some of these critical aspects already find mention in the statute as well.